So, had a few minutes to kill before heading to my next appointment, taking a little break. Had to fill up Tiny Yeti. That's only the second time today, so I'm doing pretty good. As you can see behind me, this is beautiful Lake Killarney in Winter Park, Florida. One of thousands of lakes across Florida, and even in this pocket around Orlando, there are loads of them. And from an inspirational aspect, I think it's important to talk a little bit about what we do come across often in the fertilizer business, which we've touched on a few times, but I think maybe we'll take a little bit of a different track on this, which is the leaching and runoff piece that seems to be permeating a lot of the industry. In prior videos, you would have seen me talk about this with my friend Sean Mundell in Hawaii, with Matt Martin, John Borden, and Jesse Smith. When we were in Orlando, it came up a little bit too because of how some of these ordinances have affected fertility practices. So here in Florida, it is an issue. It comes up a lot. There is a blackout period that affects mainly coastal cities, not all of them even. It's been designated sort of city by city, county by county. The time frames are all the same. Typically starts June 1st, ends October 1st, in which you can apply no nitrogen. Now, there's already a phosphorus loose ban. You can test for phosphorus and apply it, like most places. If there's a deficiency, they'll allow you to do it, but not as a standard program. And the reason is because of the algal blooms that have been seen for so many years. And it's interesting because everybody you talk to has sort of a different opinion on where that's coming from and why. Now, there are natural occurrences of this where larger lakes, like Lake Okeechobee, where it'll fill in, and it is a eutrophying, an old lake, an old system that's got a lot of organic matter that has to decompose and do what lakes do, and that can lead to algal blooms on its own, and sometimes those do get flushed down the Indian River and places like that. And then there's the flip side of it, that while there's sort of a natural decomposition, there's also what can happen when there is a nutrient runoff or nutrient pollution piece. So as a lawn care or service provider, thinking about those things, it doesn't really come up all that often about being good at your job, understanding your soils and what can happen, because here, just behind me in this lawn, it's sand. It's just sand. It's super coarse. The sprinklers were on this morning, and it's dry out there already. The water goes right through it. So if you think about that, if you're dealing with anything that's soluble, and which basically means that it'll free flow with water will carry it. Soluble materials will move with the water flow. And if you don't have a net, basically, of organic matter or root structure to pull the particles so that water can continue to flow through, you have to think about that system, organic matter and root zones, and that piece, this top layer of topsoil, as a giant filter, okay? To where anything that is an insoluble or a mineral or a nutrient salt, whatever it might be, is getting through with the water, sticking in that zone, and being allowed to be taken up into the roots once it hits that zone. Carried via water to roots, through hydrolysis into the plant. So what happens when you have these heavy, or I should say, large land masses that are very, very sandy? Florida is mainly sand. You get it inland in some places, you run into clay. The Panhandle has a lot of clay. Some places are more of a muck-based system where things were dug out and put on lawns, but for the most part, it's sand. It's porous, it's coarse, and it's very open. And the only thing that can really help to hold that up is the addition of this sort of root zone-based organic matter added. And that's really what it's going to be, but just growing and focusing on that root zone, because since everything is so porous, roots don't typically like to go down deep here because they're getting watered and the water's moving so quick they don't move. And that actually causes a further stress. It keeps too much heat in the root zone, which can allow plants to stress out faster. So again, we go back to that focus of really building up the root zone, allowing that to be sort of the main staple of how to preserve soil health. But so let's go back to this lake for a second. The wall out front here is about 3 feet down from the grass, okay? And I'm not talking about people who spread fert and it goes into the lake. That's not what we're talking about here. You know, I'm going to just go ahead and trust that everybody who's doing applications is using shields when they're spreading their granular, and they're doing the right thing when it comes to waterways. But let's think about it from a rain event. Everything here slopes towards that lake. Not to mention it's already sand. So anything that's going out here and passing through this system fast is ending up right out here, right here. It doesn't really have any other place to go. It's too close from this point to that point. And you can take that and scale out, just kind of keep moving away from the body of water, because there's another one not far from here. There's another one just over here. There's all these lakes, and then there's canals that connect them, and you know, eventually there's a massive aquifer here. So when we talk about blackouts in Florida, one of my biggest areas of contention with the whole concept is this. I do believe that it's a problem in a big way. I think that the leaching and runoff is a major issue here. There's a lot of rain that falls. It could rain 2 inches right now and everything would be dry in 20 minutes. But how it's been gone about and thought through is completely backwards of what would be considered common sense, because we have a 12-month growing season here for the most part. There's a couple of little stall times, but doesn't really affect anything. Things are always green. And they're limiting nitrogen during the rainy season. Now, okay, so that's fine. All right, let's talk about the science behind that. There's a lot of rainfall typically if it's a good year. There's a lot of nitrogen in the rainfall. There's less time of sunny days. That's not really true. There's a lot of sun. The grass grows pretty freely, but it still runs out of energy. It's on a standard program, and a lot of companies struggle with that down here because they take that time to just apply potassium or maybe some minors if they are thinking about it, instead of running a more nutritive forward program. They're still kind of running just what they think they can put out, and that's just how it has to be. So had it been better thought through, we wouldn't have blackouts here in the state of Florida. We wouldn't have them at all. We would have limits to nutrients. So what I'm saying is, rather than saying you can still apply 4 to 6 pounds of nitrogen to your Floratam grass, but now you're only doing it over an 8-month time frame instead of 12. That's what they're doing now. So really think about that for a second. They're packing it into 8 months rather than 12, because there's a 4-month cycle where you can't apply it. So they've taken the loads and gone heavier in shorter time frames. What do you think is going to happen? It's just pushing more material that the plant can't use, which is just going to go into the water anyway. It's as if that the suggestions that are being made are designed to show that having a summer blackout makes no sense because there's still leaching occurring. But it's only because they continue to apply the same amount even in opposite times. What would make sense is just limit it. We know from my side, from what we teach, from what I teach, from how we develop programs, that a 12-month growing season we can run beautiful grass on 1.8 pounds of nitrogen annually. Okay, so if you split that apart, that's a 1/3 pound of N per 1,000 every application 6 times. It's not that much. it's 30% of what's being recommended. 30%. So think about that. If we're able to get this knowledge out to people, okay, help them to understand that here's how we get to those levels of being able to lower our nutrient loads, we are immediately taking the potential, I'm not saying it would take all of this out, but we're taking 70% of the runoff and leaching just out of the environment. Kind of a no-brainer. Why don't we limit the amount, not the time? So what's wrong with having somebody apply something in the summertime? Does it have higher potential of runoff? I suppose. Depends on what they're applying. But no more than if you put that same pound out and you got a rainstorm in December. It's no different. So why is that even a consideration? So I urge you, if there's Floridians that are watching this, I want you to start thinking about that. I want you to bring that up to your local city council, the people that are talking about these ordinances. Now there's talking about a wintertime blackout. So what? Now we're going to hear recommendations coming from the land-grant universities that you should put out 2 pounds of nitrogen at a time, 3 times a year. That's not going to work, but that's what's going to happen. So common sense goes a long way, and it really needs to be considered to preserve this type of environment. I mean, you can be okay with algae, sure, but I mean, if I was looking out on this lake and I could see that, and I could see the sheen of glowing neon green, I probably wouldn't be too happy about it, especially knowing that that was, again, here you're going to hear me say it again, like a self-inflicted problem that could have been corrected with very little energy. Very little energy. So pay attention to that. The infiltration rate on sand is so high compared to clay. Clay is going to be more susceptible to runoff, not leaching. 2 different things. This is a leaching issue, and it can be a runoff issue if it's a super high volume of rainfall. But for the most part, we're going to be dealing with leaching and particles passing through the soil system and getting into the water that way. So think about that. When you're out there and you're on your lawn and you do have these bodies of water, someone is always downstream from you.